bow ties really is something that's got a lot of traction recently in the industry, moving on just from using things like a risk matrix, where you usually have likelihood and consequence. It takes it a step further to actually visualize the inputs into taking those actions to mitigate against those hazards and risks. So a bow tie, like the name, is essentially a graphical representation of the threats that are posed to a top event or something occurring, something untoward, so something bad happening, and then also those consequences. So at either end, you've got the threats and then the consequences. And if you imagine the shape of a bow tie with a knot in the middle, one triangle on the left, one triangle on the right, one on your left is your threats and on the right is your consequences. So what a bow tie really does is it enables the discussion or the facilitation of generating some ideas around where we actually have deficiencies to prevent that from occurring, and then also deficiencies in preventing it from being as bad as it might have been otherwise. So we think of something like driving a car. So our top event in the middle, the bow tie, would be the car veers off the road and has an accident. So our threats to that would be things like driving intoxicated. So in driving intoxicated, your barrier might be, well, you have a breathalyzer test or ignition interlock device based around breathalyzer test. So that's one standalone control measure or barrier, as we call it. The flow on from that might be, okay, you veer off the road and you have an accident, if we're now thinking the other side of the bow tie, and you have your consequences. So the consequence of going off the road might be you go off into a paddock and you don't harm anyone, and that's the end of the accident. But it could be really bad. It could be something like the driver contacts something inside the vehicle. So you hit into something and you hit your head on the steering wheel or on the windscreen and you're injured or killed. Barrier preventing the consequence being as bad as that could be something like airbags. So in a bow tie diagram, you get to visually see these barriers forming on either side of that knot in the middle of the bow tie. And it helps you to, identify where you've got deficiencies, that doing it on a spreadsheet or through a risk matrix wouldn't give you that ability to see that or pick up. It really helps that sort of generating those ideas or things that need improving. Another aspect of a bow tie, we talk about balancing a bow tie. So remember, left-hand side threats, right-hand side consequence. If you've got all your barriers just on the upstream, i.e. the threat side, and hardly any or none on the right-hand side, that shows that you've probably got a weakness there. You haven't thought about the consequence side of the house enough. So again, a visual tool. It enables a group of people to work on, whether it's a board, on a computer screen, to all get on the same page and start noticing some of those deficiencies in your systems or in your risk management process. So aviation, obviously highly complex and safety critical industry. So an example would be, the regulators actually use bow ties, and I'll use an example. Theirs are massive, so I just use a very basic example. That's why I used the automotive example. In the real world, the regulators actually use bow ties to look at where their barriers, i.e. their regulations, are covering off on certain aspects of that risk. So if you look on CASA's website or one of the regulators' websites, they typically publish those bow ties, and theirs are massive. You would have to zoom in massively to try and find out what they've actually got in there. They're huge. So anything from like runway incursions, that type of thing, they'll have a heap of stuff on that left-hand side, the threats, because that's where the regulators mainly focus. They won't have a lot on the consequence side. But as an operator, you can actually go to the regulator's website and have a look at that, and that can form the basis of the start of your own bow ties for your internal safety risk management process. And then you would start leaning more into that right-hand side of the bow to see where you can potentially prevent some of those undesired consequences.